Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to be reading Chapter 11 of Parah Adumah by Maimonides. How is the person who is impure because of contact with a human corpse purified by the water of sprinkling? A person who is pure takes 3 stalks of hyssop and binds them with one bound. Each stalk should have at least one bud. He should dip the top of the buds in the sprinkling water while it is in the container. Focus his intent and sprinkle it on the impure person or utensil on the 3rd and 7th days after sunrise. If one sprinkled after dawn, it is acceptable. After the water has been sprinkled on a person on the 7th day, he should immerse in a mikvah during the day, wait until nightfall, and then in the morning he is pure. If one dipped the hyssop on or in the water on the night, sprinkled it during the day, or dipped it into the water during the day and sprinkled it at night, the sprinkling is invalid. Moreover, the water imparts impurity just as the water of the ashes on the red heifer does, as will be explained. The sprinkling is not valid unless the hyssop is dipped in the water and it is sprinkled from it on the 3rd and 7th days after sunrise. If one transgressed and performed these activities after dawn, it is acceptable, as explained above. When a person became impure due to a corpse and remained several days without having the water sprinkled upon him, when he comes to have the water sprinkled upon him, he should count 3 days in our presence. The water is sprinkled upon him on the 3rd and the 7th days. He immerses in a mikvah on the 7th day and waits until nightfall. To whom does the above apply? To a common person who comes to have the water sprinkled upon him, even if he says that this is the 3rd day after he contracted an impurity. This word is not accepted, for perhaps he became impure on this day. Therefore, he must count the days in our presence. If by contrast, a shiver comes to have the water sprinkled upon him, it may be sprinkled on him and his implements immediately. When such water was sprinkled on a person on the 3rd day, it was not sprinkled upon him on the 7th day. He may immerse in a mikvah whenever he desires after the 7th day, whether during the night or during the day, and the water should be sprinkled on him during the day, whether before immersion or after immersion. Even if he is immersed on the night of the 9th day or the night of the 10th day, the water may be sprinkled on him on the following day after sunrise. It is acceptable for all these who are impure to have this water sprinkled upon them. What is implied? The water may be sprinkled on Zavim, Zavos, women in Nida state, women impure because of childbirth on the 3rd and 7 days after they contract the ritual impurity connected with the human corpse. After the sprinkling, they are purified from that impurity, although they are still impure because of another type of impurity, as implied by Numbers chapter 19, verse 19. And the pure person shall sprinkle on the impure. That is, one may derive that the sprinkling is effective for him, even though he is impure. Similarly, a person who is uncircumcised may have this water sprinkled upon him. What is implied. If an uncircumcised person contracted the impurity connected with a corpse and had a water sprinkled upon him on the third and seventh day, he is pure from this impurity. When he is circumcised, he must immerse himself and may eat sacrificial foods in the evening. The optimum way of fulfilling the mitzvah of the hyssop is to use 3 stalks, and for each stalk to have 1 bud. If at first there was 3 buds and then only 2 remained, or if one took 2 at first and bound them together, it is acceptable. Should the buds open and the leaves fall off, even if only the slightest portion of each remain, it is acceptable, because as long as the smallest amount remains for a hyssop, it is acceptable. When a stalk has 3 buds, one should separate one from the other and afterwards and bind them together. For the mikvah is for them to be bound, even though this is not explicitly stated in the Torah. If one separated them but did not bind them, or bound them without separating them, or used them for sprinkling without separating them or binding them, the sprinkling is invalid. When a hyssop is short, one should bind it with a string on a weaving needle or the like, dip it into the water, lift it up, and then hold the hyssop in one's hand and sprinkle it with it. If he did not do so, but instead sprinkled with it while bound to the needle, and he was uncertain whether he sprinkled from the string, from the needle, or from the bud, the sprinkling is invalid. One should not sprinkle the undeveloped stalks of hyssop, nor the seed pods, but with stalks. This is what is meant by underdeveloped stalks which have not reached maturity. Nevertheless, if the water of the ashes of the red heifer are sprinkled on a person with an underdeveloped hyssop, and that person entered the temple, he is not liable. From which point should a hyssop be used for sprinkling? From the time its buds. When a hyssop has been used for sprinkling of this water, it may be used to purify a person afflicted by Azaras. Whenever a hyssop is described by an additional term, it is not acceptable. The hyssop is called a hyssop alone in the one which is acceptable. It is the hyssop that is eaten domestically. The species which are called Greek hyssop, red hyssop, desert hyssop, or Roman hyssop are invalid. A hyssop that was worshipped as an Asherah came from a city that was led astray, belonged to a false deity, or came from impure truma, is invalid. If it comes from pure truma as an initial preference, one should not sprinkle with it. If one did, the sprinkling is acceptable. When a hyssop was gathered to be used for kindling and liquids fell upon it, one may dry it and it will remain acceptable for sprinkling. If it was reaped for use as food, even if the water was dried, it is unacceptable, because it is considered as impure for sprinkling. For all liquids, foods, and implements are considered as impure with regard to the purification process using the water of the ashes of the red heifer, as will be explained. If a hyssop was reaped to use for the purification process, it is as if it was reaped for kindling. Thus, if a liquid fell on it, it may be dried and used for sprinkling. That concludes chapter 11 of Parah Adumah. Please subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.